So, hello, welcome back. How are you? Is everything good? Okay, my name is Ricardo Montoya. I think you already know me. I am your teacher for the fifth or sixth semester, fourth semester. I'm not really sure yet, but okay. On the last class, we were speaking about the simple future. Okay, we are in the middle of time tenses or explaining time tenses. We have already checked the simple present, the simple past, and the simple future. The simple present and the simple past are probably the two most difficult ones. They have a lot of exceptions and things that work specifically in a specific way only for them. So if you have any questions about them, please go back on the list of episodes and the channel and try to look for those two. Those are important. Okay, I will try to give them an order that makes sense, but well, you're gonna have to check those first. Right now, today, we're gonna start with other time tenses. We're gonna start moving away from the simple time tenses. So, as I told you on the well, a few episodes ago when we started speaking about time tenses, we have 12 time. We have 12 time tenses in English. We have the simple present, the simple past, and the simple future. Those are three. We have the present continuous, the past continuous, and the future continuous. We're gonna start with those, with the continuous time tenses. They are called the continuous time tenses or the progressive time tenses. It depends on the book that you're checking. It depends on the teacher that you have. I tend to call it continuous because it is the way I got accustomed to it. The first time I was working as a teacher, the book I was using called it the present continuous and the past continuous and the future continuous. So I call them continuous. Maybe you know them as progressive. It is the same thing. It is the same. It is the same time tense. It's just the name that changes. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do when we speak about the present continuous or the present progressive is we need to identify when to use it and how is it different from the simple present. We need to make a difference between the simple present and the present continuous because you have to decide. You have to think about whatever you want to say and decide if it is better to use the simple present or the present continuous. Okay. As you remember, the simple present is the one that we have already checked. The simple present is used when you're speaking about something that is always true, like for example, the sky is blue, or I have a sister, or I like hot dogs. I mean, it is always true. Or when you're speaking about routines, things that you normally do. If you say, I wake up at 8, it doesn't mean that it is 8 and you are waking up. When you say, I wake up at 8, the simple present, it means I normally wake up at 8. If you say, I go to this school, or I mean, it means I always or I normally go to that school. If you say, I don't know, whatever you say, I live in X city, I live in León, in Guanajuato, I live in Mexico, it means I always live there. It is like a routine, like something you normally do, right? When you say I work at the university, it means I normally work at the university, or that is what I normally do. It is my routine. In the present continuous or present progressive, the things are going to be a little bit different. In the present continuous or the present progressive, when you're using it, you're going to say something a little different. When you're using the present continuous or the present progressive, it means in this moment. It means right now. Yeah, it is the present continuous is the one that is speaking about this specific moment. If I tell you, for example, I run in the park. I run in the park. You don't know if that's true or not. You don't know if that's true or not. You need to know me. Maybe I run in the park. Maybe it is something that I normally do. Or maybe I never do that. Maybe I never run in the park. But if I tell you, I am running in the park, that is a present continuous sentence. If I tell you, I am running in the park, you know that is false. Because in this moment, for me, I am sitting, I am watching my computer, I am speaking, I am teaching, I am recording, but the thing that but those things are happening right now. In this moment, I am not running in the park. Well, except if this is recorded, whatever, you understand the difference, right? So when you're using the present continuous, you mean in this specific moment. You're trying to say right now, in this moment, okay? The present continuous or present progressive are the same. The name changes depending on the book that you're using. The present continuous or progressive is used to speak about events that are in progress at the moment the speaker is talking, in opposition to the simple present that is used to refer to routines or things that are always true. Okay? For routines and things that are always true, the simple present. For things that are happening right now, the present continuous. Okay? So let's speak about the present continuous a little bit. You remember that we need to have a subject, we need to have an auxiliary or an auxiliary, we need to have a verb, and we need to have a complement. Well, the complement is always optional. You can have it or you cannot have it. It is pretty much the same thing, right? So you know this about English. This is something that we have been using. This is something that we have been doing for a long time. This is whenever you need to use an affirmative statement. If you want to make an affirmative statement, you need to use this structure, okay? What happens if you want to make a negative statement? I think you remember, you can go back and check, but when you have a negative statement, the only thing that is different is that the auxiliary, it takes the negative. This is just necessary. It is mandatory that this happens like that, okay? What happens if you want to make a question? If you want to make a question, like this, if you want to make a question, the only thing that you have to do is your subject and your auxiliary, they have to change positions. They have to switch positions. You start with the auxiliary first, and then you have your subject. Yes, the only difference between this and this, affirmative statements and yes, no questions, is that, again, you have to switch first the auxiliary and then the subject. How do you ask information questions? If you have an information question, it is exactly the same. It is exactly this: subject, auxiliary, verb, and complement. Sorry, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. It is exactly the same, but the only difference is that instead of starting with the auxiliary, you need to start with something called a question word. The question word is, you know, what, which, when, how often, how much, etc. And you use, sorry. Oh, I think okay, sorry. I think I made a mistake. That's it. Okay, so the thing is, this is the way that we know that we have to make affirmative statements, negative statements, yes, no questions, and information question. This is, oh, sorry, I moved a little bit. This is always the same way, okay? Let's move on. Yeah. So this is the same thing, right? For affirmative statements, subject, auxiliary, verb, and complement. For negative statements, subject, auxiliary with negative, verb, and complement. For yes, no questions, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. For information question, question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. It is the same. Now, what is the difference with the present continuous? How do we use it? It is very simple. First, in the present continuous, sorry, I cannot change it once I did it. Okay, first, the first thing that we have to check is that in the present continuous, the auxiliary, this part here, the auxiliary is always going to be, the verb to be. This is the auxiliary of the continuous time tenses. Because this is the present continuous or present progressive, this verb to be is conjugated in the present. Remember that the verb to be in the present has three possibilities. It can be am, are, or is. So the auxiliary is, for example, if I have the subject I, the auxiliary is am, right? Subject I, auxiliary am. If I have the subject you, the auxiliary is the verb to be in the present, but for the second person, it will be are. If you have a question, well, this is negative, it will be aren't, okay? If you have a question, it's first the auxiliary and then the subject. So if the subject is, I don't know, she, the auxiliary comes first, and the auxiliary will be is she. Subject auxiliary with negative, auxiliary and subject. And then the verb, this verb, whenever you have continuous or progressive time tenses, progressive or continuous, whenever you have this verb, well, this is the verb to be conjugated in the present, because this is the present continuous, and this verb is always in gerund. What is gerund? Gerund is when the verb finishes with ing. So with continuous or progressive time tenses, in the case of the present continuous, the verb is always in gerund. The auxiliary is in the present, and it is conjugated to the person, and the verb is always with ing. So you say something like, I am talking. This will be the verb, and the complement is to you. I am talking to you. This is exactly what I am doing at this moment, in the present moment. I am recording. You aren't, I can say something you are not doing in this specific moment. I know that in this moment, you aren't sleeping. If you were sleeping, you wouldn't be watching me. So you aren't sleeping. The complement is always optional. So maybe with this, it's okay. You aren't sleeping. This is a negative statement. Subject, auxiliary with negative, subject, auxiliary with negative, and the verb is always with ing, okay? If I want to make a question, I start with the auxiliary, then the subject, and then the verb with ing. Is she eating sushi? This is a yes/no question, okay? So the only possible answer is yes, she is, or no, she's not. If you want to make an information question, you start with a question word. For example, why? If you are looking for, if you're looking for reasons why, the auxiliary is am, are, or is. In the case of the third person, is. The subject, he. It has to be the third person. If it was the second person, it will be are. If it was the first person, it will be am. Why am I? Why are you? Why is he, she, or it? So why is he a verb? Why is he talking? Why is he talking so loud? Okay? So again, let's check this. We have an affirmative statements, subject, the auxiliary is the verb to be, the verb is in gerund, and the complement is optional. We have subject, auxiliary, verb with ing, and this is a complement. The auxiliary is am because the subject is the first person of the singular, and the auxiliary has to be in the present. The verb to be, but in the present, it has to be am, are, or is. In this case, am. Okay? When you want to make it negative, you have your subject, the auxiliary takes the negative, you have your verb, and you have your complement. Subject, the auxiliary taking the negative. Why aren't? Are because it is the second person. The second person of the singular or the plural needs are. The verb with ing, and remember that this is always optional. So if I don't have any complement, that's okay. If I want to make a question, I start with the auxiliary, then subject, then verb, and then complement. Because this is the present continuous or the present progressive, the auxiliary is the verb to be in the present, am, are, or is, and the verb has to be in the gerund. So first, the auxiliary, am, are, or is. Why is? Because the subject is she. The subject is the third person. Depending on the person is the auxiliary that you're going to use. The verb is with ing. It is an gerund. And then you have your complement. So you have auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. This is a yes/no question. Is she eating sushi? Yes, she is. Or is she eating sushi? No, she's not. If you have an information question, question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, always with ing, and complement. Why is the verb with ing? Because this is the present continuous or the present progressive. Every time you have a continuous or progressive time tense, you always need the verb with ing, and ing. Okay? So this is very important. Remember that the verbs in gerund, when you have a verb in gerund, let me just eliminate all of this. I hope that you remember all of it. Remember that when you have a verb in gerund, like for example, I don't know, you can say working. Yeah? You have this verb, working. How do you know if this is the verb or is not the verb? Okay? I am gonna have another sentence. For example, I can say something like, I hate working. Or for example, I am working a lot. Yeah? Remember, this okay. I think I have to do it again. Working. This one's here. I'm gonna rewrite this. It's a little far away from what it had to be. I am working a lot. So, how do you know what is the verb? Remember that you have, again, like always, you have subject, auxiliary, verb, and complement, right? So, the first part that we have is the subject. The subject is I, the subject is I. Then the next part that we have must be the auxiliary. In this case, we have the auxiliary am. The auxiliary am is for the present continuous. When you have the word hate, hate is not an auxiliary. The simple present doesn't use hate as an auxiliary. The future uses will, the past uses did, the present perfect uses have or has. So hate is not an auxiliary. In reality, in this case, the auxiliary will be do. Remember that in the simple present, we never use the auxiliary in affirmative statements. This is an affirmative statement. This is an affirmative statement. We never use the auxiliary. And in reality, The verb, in this case, the verb is hate. Yes, the verb is working. When you have the present continuous, the verb is always with ing. When you have the simple present, the verb has to be hate or hates. If it was thus, because we have do, then we don't really need the s. I hate working. In this case, the verb is hate. In this case, the verb is working. And in this case, for example, something that is kind of difficult to understand sometimes, working is the complement. Yeah? We have subject, the auxiliary is not here, verb and complement. Subject, auxiliary, verb with ing, and complement. So the verbs with ing are the present continuous, but they are only the present continuous. You can say that this sentence is in the present continuous only when you have two things. You need two things. You need the auxiliary, the verb to be, and the verb with ing. If you only have a verb with ing, but you don't have the auxiliary, see, if you don't have am, are, or is, if you don't have the auxiliary, this is not a verb. This is a verb complement. Do you remember that? When you say I hate working, the real verb is hating. I hate something. I hate dogs. I hate cats. I hate you. I hate working. Working is the name of the thing that you hate. So in this case, working is not really a verb. In this case, working is working as if it was a noun. In this case, working is a verb. And what is the difference? The difference is in the structure: subject, auxiliary, verb, and complement. If you have this auxiliary and this complement, this is your verb. If you have this verb, you don't have a verb plus a verb. This is not really a verb. Remember, verbs, verbs in gerund are not always verbs. They can be verbs or they can be verboides. Do you remember that? O verbos sustantivados. Si no se acuerdan de esta parte de los complementos verbales, por favor vayan a checar esa parte al video que es específico sobre eso. El hecho de que ustedes encuentren una palabra, un verbo con ing, no significa que es un verbo necesariamente. Los verbos con ing, los verbos conjugados con ing, pueden ser el verbo o pueden ser un verbo sustantivado. ¿Cómo voy a saber si es el verbo o un verbo sustantivado? Pues por la estructura. ¿Sí? Si el verbo en ing tiene como auxiliar al verbo to be, am, are, or is, entonces es un tiempo continuo. Los verbos en tiempos continuos tienen que estar en ing. Si yo tengo un verbo en ing, pero antes de ese lo que tengo es otro verbo, y en realidad el auxiliar sería do, or does, or did, que a veces no se ponen, porque bueno, el presente simple y el pasado simple ya vimos que son los dos más raros, entonces este ni siquiera es un verbo. Más o menos, ¿sí? Tenemos que darnos cuenta de cómo están hechas las cosas. Déjenme borrar esto y tratar de volver a dibujarlo un poquito más claro con un ejemplo que tal vez funcione mejor, ¿ok? Voy a tratar de hacerlo un poquito más limpio. Vamos a hacerlo con puro texto. Entonces podemos decir, si vamos a hacer una oración afirmativa, son oraciones afirmativas, ¿ok? En el presente simple, yo puedo decir, o en el pasado simple, puedo decir sujeto, el auxiliar sería do, o bueno, vamos a poner la tercera persona, he, sujeto, auxiliar, sería does. Vamos a cambiar un poquito los colores para que, no puedo, bueno, ignórenme. Los voy a poner entonces en negro y luego los checamos. Sujeto, el auxiliar sería does. Como es oración afirmativa, en presente simple no se usa el verbo, entonces el verbo se lleva la S. Como no tengo el does, entonces pongo like, or love, or hate, o lo que yo quiera, no sé. He love. Aquí, como no tengo el auxiliar, entonces le pongo la S. Como no tengo el does, entonces le pongo loves. ¿Sí? Loves. He loves. Y después el complemento. El complemento es la cosa que él odia. La cosa que él odia puede ser, I don't know, he loves tacos. Le encantan los tacos. Él ama los tacos. It can be dogs. Le gustan los perros. Él ama los perros. Puede ser swimming. Él ama nadar. Acuérdense, un verbo con ing no necesariamente es el verbo. En este caso el verbo es love. ¿Cómo sé que es el verbo? Pues hasta tiene una S. Está conjugado a la tercera persona. Es en el presente simple. ¿Sí? ¿Qué pasa en el presente continuo? Yo tengo una oración afirmativa en el presente continuo. Tengo también el mismo sujeto. He. Pero ahora el auxiliar es a fuerzas y es el verbo to be en presente. Am, are, or is. En el caso de he, is. Lo tengo que poner. El verbo también lleva ing. Vamos a usar el mismo verbo. Swimming. Y mi complemento es, no sé. He's swimming a lot. ¿Ok? Entonces aquí yo tengo una cosa que se ve un poco extraña, porque tengo repetido, o parece que tengo repetido, el mismo verbo. Yo tengo aquí el verbo swimming. Perdón, este es sólido y no deja ver. Ok, aquí yo tengo swimming y aquí yo tengo swimming. Pero, si ustedes recuerdan, si se dan cuenta, ¿sí? Yo tengo mi sujeto, mi auxiliar, mi verbo y mi complemento. En ese caso, swimming funciona como el complemento, ¿sí? En el caso del presente simple. Y en el otro, swimming es el verbo. Loves es el verbo, ¿sí? ¿Por qué es eso? Porque aquí el auxiliar es is y el auxiliar es does y el sujeto está al principio. Sería más o menos así como funciona, ¿sí? Sujeto, auxiliar, verbo y complemento. Yo tengo sujeto, auxiliar, verbo y complemento. Como es el auxiliar to be en el presente y el verbo con ing, este de aquí es the present continuous, ¿sí? Este de acá, en realidad este swimming no es el verbo, es el complemento. Yo tengo sujeto, el auxiliar, que no se puso. Como no puse el auxiliar, el verbo, toma la S. Y como este es el verbo, no puedo tener dos verbos. Esto de acá parece un verbo, pero en realidad es un complemento. Es un complemento verbal. Pueden estar en infinitivo o en gerundio, pero no es el verbo. Es la cosa que a él le encanta. A él le encantan los perros, a él le encanta el sushi, a él le encanta nadar. Esto es simple present. Lo importante es que se den cuenta de que un verbo con ing no necesariamente es un verbo. ¿Cómo sé que es un verbo? Pues por la estructura. Esto lo dije varias veces y lo voy a volver a repetir. La estructura es la que hace el idioma, no las palabras. ¿Ok? Sujeto, auxiliar, verbo y complemento. Es un poco más difícil de ver que eso, porque bueno, ustedes recordarán que no se pone el auxiliar. Si no se pone el auxiliar, he loves swimming, entonces aquí nosotros nos quedamos, pero loves no es un auxiliar. No hay ningún tiempo que utilice el loves como auxiliar. Además, este es un verbo. Tan es un verbo que está conjugado. Tiene la S porque no está el does. Entonces, esto de acá es el complemento. Este de acá es el verbo. Así es más o menos como funciona. Es un poquito raro, pero espero que tenga sentido, que lo encuentren lógico. ¿Ok? Déjenme borrar todo esto. And then we have other examples. Affirmative statements. In affirmative statements, what do you have? In affirmative statements, you have subject, auxiliary, verb, and complement. In the present continuous, subject, the auxiliary is the verb to be because the subject is I, the auxiliary is am in the present, the verb is always with ing, and the complement is optional and is here. I am watching a show. What does this mean? It means right now, in this moment. I am in the middle of this action, okay? Negative. Subject, the auxiliary takes the negative, verb, and complement. So, subject, the auxiliary takes the negative. In the case of am, you don't have the contraction amn't. Are, you can say aren't. Is, you can say isn't. But am not, it has to be separated. I am not, the verb is with ing, and then you have the complement. I am not watching a show. So in this moment, at this specific time, I am not in the middle of doing this action, okay? How do you make a question? You invert them. Instead of subject auxiliary, you start auxiliary subject, verb with ing, and then you have your complement. So, am I watching a show? It's kind of weird to ask a yes/no question about myself. Am I watching a show? It's like I'm not sure, and I am asking myself. Maybe yes, I'm watching a show. No, I'm watching a show. Normally, you use another person. Are you watching a show? Yes, I am, or no, I'm not. If you ask, am I watching a show? It's because you're not sure about what you're doing, which is kind of weird, but technically, it is possible. Information questions, again, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. It is the same as this. The only difference is that you start with a question word. The question word why requires that you respond with a reason. Question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. Why am I watching a show? I need to know the reason. Why am I watching a show? And then you tell me what the reason is. Why am I doing that? And something that is very, very, very important is that I told you the simple present and the simple past are the two most difficult time tenses because both of them, the simple present and the simple past, they use the verb to be is different. The verb to be never mixes with the auxiliary do or does or did. You have to change everything. The rest of the time tenses, I told you, yo les dije que los otros 10 tiempos eran mucho más fáciles porque no hay excepciones. El auxiliar siempre se pone en afirmativos, en negativos, en preguntas de información. El auxiliar siempre está ahí. Además, otro problema que teníamos en el presente simple y en el pasado simple es que el verbo to be nunca usaba el auxiliar. Pues aquí el verbo to be es un verbo como cualquier otro. Yo tengo mi sujeto, yo tengo mi auxiliar, que es el verbo to be, y yo tengo mi verbo, que también es el verbo to be. Como este es el verbo, está en ing. You are being irrational. Tú estás siendo irracional. In this moment, you are being like that. ¿Sí? Para hacer una oración en presente simple, o en presente continuo o presente progresivo, el auxiliar siempre es are, is, or am, y cualquier verbo con ing, incluyendo el propio verbo be. I am being, yo estoy siendo. Recuerden que en español estar y ser son el mismo verbo. En inglés tenemos to be, que funciona como los dos. En español tenemos dos, estar y ser. Aquí dice yo estoy siendo o tú estás siendo irracional. En este momento estás siendo. ¿Ok? Entonces esta parte es bien importante. El verbo to be para el presente continuo o el presente progresivo es como cualquier otro verbo. No hay ninguna cosa que lo haga especial. En el presente simple y en el pasado simple, en el presente simple y en el pasado simple sí era otra cosa. En el futuro ya nos dimos cuenta que el verbo to be es como cualquier otro verbo. En el presente continuo o presente progresivo es como cualquier otro verbo. Si tienen dudas sobre el presente y el pasado, les aconsejo que se vayan para atrás y chequen esos dos videos primero. Vamos por orden. Primero es presente simple, pasado simple, futuro simple. Ahorita ya estamos con los tiempos continuos, presente continuo. Tendremos que hablar también del pasado continuo y del futuro continuo, ¿ok? Pero me parece que eso ya será en la siguiente ocasión. Sí, esto ya es el pasado continuo. Hasta aquí terminamos con la parte del presente continuo, presente progresivo. Otra vez, esto es un repaso, esto son cosas que ustedes ya han visto, esto no es nuevo para el semestre en el que estamos. Estamos en quinto, sexto semestre. Estoy haciendo este material preventivamente durante el verano. para lo que se va a venir durante el semestre, entonces todavía no sé bien con quién me está tocando trabajar, pero es para los cursos de la Universidad de Guanajuato. Mi nombre es Ricardo Montoya, se los repito porque como tal vez muchos de ustedes no me conozcan en persona, a lo mejor solo van viendo los videos y se les va la onda. Entonces, bueno, sí, mi nombre es Ricardo Montoya. Este es el curso de la Universidad de Guanajuato de inglés. Desea, estos son los temas. Entonces, bueno, como siempre les digo, si tienen alguna duda, alguna pregunta en específico, por favor anótenla en un papelito, anótenla en su libreta, traten de entender más o menos cómo funciona esto. Les voy a dejar unos ejercicios que traten de reforzar todo esto que estamos viendo en las presentaciones. Pero cualquier duda ustedes apúntenla y cuando nos veamos más directamente en una sesión interactiva, me las pueden preguntar, podemos hacer ejercicios específicos y usar un pizarrón específico donde vamos a retomar todos estos temas, ¿ok? Pero es importante que ustedes los vean. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. You can go now. You can go and have something to eat. If you want to continue watching, that's okay. If you want to rest, I think you deserve it now. Okay, so thank you very much. I'll see you around.